And I've got some good news for you today. News that you should want to run and tell somebody, news that should make you want to tap some hearts and some likes and put some emojis and some memes down in the comments. I've got some good news for you that you should want to share this with somebody and tell somebody, and somebody say, preacher, what is the good news? The good news is that there is a word from the Lord. Even on today, there is a word from the Lord coming to us out of two books, the gospel. Of course, it's Easter, the gospel, according to Matthew 28, and then 1 Corinthians chapter 15. Allow me to read these to you and follow along. Matthew 28:5, the angel said to the woman, do not be afraid. I know that you are looking for Jesus who was crucified. He is not here, for he has been raised, as he said. Come see the place where he lay. Then go quickly and tell his disciples he has been raised from the dead. And indeed, he is going ahead of you to Galilee. There you will see him. This is my message for you. So they left the tomb quickly with fear and great joy and ran to tell his disciples. Suddenly Jesus met them and said, greetings. And they came to him, took hold of his feet and worshiped him. Then Jesus said to them, do not be afraid. Go and tell my brothers to go to Galilee. There they will see me. While they were going, some of the guard went into the city and told the chief priests everything that had happened. After the priests had assembled with the elders, they devised a plan to give a large sum of money to the soldiers, telling them, you must say his disciples came by night and stole him away while we were asleep. If this comes to the governor's ears, we will satisfy him and keep you out of trouble. So they took the money and did as they were directed. And this is the story still told among the Judeans to this day. Now come with me to 1 Corinthians chapter 15, verse 14. A little differently than your Bibles may read, I translated this for us today. If Christ has not been raised, then our preaching is empty, and so is our faith. So if you don't mind praying with me for a few moments, I want to talk to you from this one word, empty. Go ahead, somebody, if you're in the car with somebody, or if you're in the church, or if you are at your house, go ahead and look at somebody and say empty. This Easter is different for a number of reasons. It's a different type of day because our mobility is limited. It's a different kind of Sunday because we cannot hear each other's amens and hallelujahs as the praise team ministers and as preaching goes forth. On top of that, it's a different kind of Easter. When we would normally celebrate the resurrection with grand processions, elaborate services, new outfits, and buffet-style dinner spreads, we find ourselves quarantined with the same folks who we have spent the last weeks with without interruption. In many ways, this day, this Sunday, this Easter feels empty. Empty of traditions that we have come to hold close to our hearts. Empty of connections with family that make life worth living. Empty of an opportunity to worship in a way that feels familiar. Empty. Empty as this sanctuary. Brother Kenny, let him see. This sanctuary has never looked like this at this time on Easter. Of course, we are not alone. Churches all over this nation and world are similarly empty. Even the Church of the Holy Sepulchre, where there's an image that I took while I was there in Jerusalem, that church on today is empty. That church was supposedly built at Joseph of Arimathea's borrowed tomb, the tomb whose stone was rolled away almost 2,000 years ago. Yes, that church is empty. That seems unbelievable. And as I was praying and considering this, I realized that the church being empty on this day is indeed unbelievable. But it is not as unbelievable as it was on the first Easter, when Jesus, the lynched brown Jew born in present day Palestine, had been buried in that tomb on Friday, but by Sunday, it was empty. What if the vacant churches that we experience today are actually some of the best imitations of the first Resurrection Sunday? They are empty today, just like the tomb was empty then. Here's a question on your handout. If you downloaded it from the website or if you have it in the email, the first question I ask you on your handout is emptiness actually a problem? What if emptiness is actually only a problem for people like the guards whose livelihoods are based on keeping bodies locked up? What if emptiness only frightens those who would rather be full with prejudice and hate in the name of law and order than to have to wrestle with the idea that prisons and graves are full of innocent people convicted of crime? What if emptiness only bothers those who would rather manufacture easy lies to populate the way that they want to see the world rather than to see that the world is much more complicated and complex than it ever has been? What if emptiness is an opportunity for us to be honest about our ignorance and weakness so that we can actually be filled? Not living on half truths, not satisfied with white lies, not content with fake news, but overwhelmed by the wonder and mystery of emptiness. The mystery of the emptiness of the tomb acknowledges even more emptiness. Because you see, the emptiness of the tomb also meant that death was empty of its sting. And the emptiness of the tomb meant that the grave was empty of its victory. And emptiness often implies that somewhere else is full, or at least there's something else that's not empty. See, we know the classic example to distinguish an optimist from a pessimist. An optimist sees a glass of water as half full, while the pessimist, on the other hand, sees the glass as half empty. But I would like to propose that fullness and emptiness go hand in hand. We see this especially in the resurrection of Jesus, because although the tomb was empty, God's promise to raise him was filled. Although Satan's plan to destroy him was empty, God's plan for salvation was full. Christ being raised from the dead leaves an empty tomb, but it fills other things. You see, and there are two things that it fills according to our 1 Corinthians 15 and 14 passage. The first thing it fills is our faith. You see, an empty tomb produces a full faith. Somebody say that. An empty tomb produces a full faith. See, the Greek word behind the word translated as in vain in 1 Corinthians 15 is the word kinon. And that word simply means empty. Paul writes that if Christ is not raised from the dead, then our faith is empty. In these days, many have posed all types of litmus tests to determine whether one has faith or not. Many have tried to juxtapose faith against fear, and this occurs often in destructive ways that put people's health and their very lives in danger. These ways make people who have harmful experiences, health challenges, or human sadness feel as if they do not have faith, and if they do have faith, their faith is empty. But I'm here to tell you that your concern about COVID-19 does not mean that your faith is empty. Your anxiety about whether or not you're going to keep your job does not mean your faith is empty. Your disappointment with the decision that you feel that God should have made differently does not mean that your faith is empty, because our faith is not rooted in our feelings, but it is the result of a revolutionary reality. Let me say that again. I said our faith is not rooted in our feelings, but it is the result of a revolutionary reality. And what's the reality, Pastor? The reality is that God raised Jesus from the dead. See, it's a reality that no matter what pain you have experienced, God can raise you. And even if sickness leads to death, God has the power to resurrect you from the dead. It is the reality that you might hang alone on Friday, be buried by yourself on Saturday, but Sunday is coming when God will lift you up. And although we've been quarantined for a while and we do not know when we'll be able to resume the version of our lives that have now been put on pause, the resurrection lets us know that the same way that God raised Jesus up from death and disappointment, from hell and humiliation, from the grave and grief, from uncertainty and ugliness, is the same way that God can raise you up. And as long as you trust that God is in the raising business, your faith is not empty, and your evidence is the emptiness of the tomb, the empty tomb. It fills our faith. But the second thing that an empty tomb produces, and I'm soon done, it produces full preaching. An empty tomb, I hear you out there honking your horns. An empty tomb produces full preaching. The Greek word for preaching is kerugma. It means more than someone getting behind a pulpit like this with an organ and yelling at you in a worship service. The word was adopted by the early Jesus followers from their surrounding environment. The kerugma was when a herald announced news. You see, back then they didn't have MSNBC or CNN apps on their iPhones. Instead, they had a herald. The herald was the ancient equivalent of a TV show host like Trevor Noah on The Daily Show, to let the people throughout the empire know when something significant was happening. And two of these kinds of significant announcements or proclamations were notices. One notice was that the war or struggle were over. And the other was news that there is someone new on the throne. Y'all hadn't shouted yet, but I'm going to get you there because we already said was the good part. Y'all missed it, but let me take my time, back up, rewind, and then walk over it. You see, the kerugma or the proclamation is a notice that we can no longer carry on business as usual. And our proclamation is no different. Life cannot be the same because the struggle is over. That's right there on your handout. The struggle is over because the victory has already been won. You see, the struggle against the evil forces that attempt to destroy black and brown lives, and the forces that work to crush women's voices and attempt to massacre appropriate health care, and the forces that try to devastate with military violence and attempt to slay hope itself. Those evil forces are not even a formidable force, because the empty tomb lets us know that they may look like they are in power now, but their time is limited, because it is actually them who are empty. See, the resurrection reminds us that greater is the one who is in us than the one who is in the world. That's why Jesus could say, be of good cheer, because I've already overcome the world. And because I have already overcome the world, victory is assured to us, because we are more than conquerors through the one who loves us. Because the tomb is empty, I can celebrate that the struggle is over. Go ahead and tell somebody the struggle is over. See, this is not premature. It's not even prophetic. It's participatory. I said it's participatory, which means that because the tomb is empty, I can declare a victory over my struggle, not in the future, but I can declare victory right now. I can pick up Tasha Cobbs Leonard's words, and the words that our children sang so beautifully a couple months ago. I can say, because the tomb is empty, no fire can burn me, no battle can turn me, no mountain can stop me, because God holds my hand. I am walking in victory. God's power is within me. No giant can defeat me, because the resurrected one knows my name. See, I'm almost out of here. See, the empty tomb produces full preaching. Not only does it let us know that the struggle is ultimately over, but it lets us know that there is someone new on the throne. Oh, y'all missed that. I said the proclamation also lets us know that there's someone new on the throne. You see, the tomb is empty on earth, but the throne in heaven is full. And it's not filled with someone that's egomaniacal and neurotic like the orange leader in the White House. It's not filled with one who makes light of a serious virus and does not take responsibility for his bad leadership. You see, heaven's throne is not filled with one who uses pain for political gain. See, no, the throne is not filled by one who prioritizes his own future at the detriment of others. See, the throne is not filled with someone who risks the lives of people, calling them essential, but at the same time doesn't view paying them fairly as essential. No, our throne is filled by one who is the greatest leader. He's so much a great leader that he's the King of Kings and the Lord of Lords. And the throne, it's filled with one who thought it not a robbery to be equal with God, but made himself of no reputation and took upon himself the form of a slave. He was one not born in the halls of power, nor did he receive $1 million loan from his father for failed business ventures. No, the one on the throne came down 40 and 2 generations and was conceived to an unwed teenage mother raised in a ghetto in Galilee after being born in an inn because his parents' poor credit history couldn't get them a room. He's the one who's on the throne, who didn't withhold health care, but provided health services by opening blind eyes, unstopping deaf ears, touching lepers without gloves, exorcising demons without masks, and even raising the dead. You see, the one on the throne did not have to give corporations a bailout to help the most vulnerable, but he was able to provide his own stimulus package by taking 2 fish and 5 loaves of bread and feeding 5,000 hungry people. The one on the throne did not give backhanded compliments to essential workers like fishers, but he made those type of people his cabinet of disciples. And as you can imagine, the powers that be did not want that type of person to sit on the throne, so they lied on him. They tried him on trumped up charges. They got the Supreme Court to be complicit in his oppression. And as the old preacher said, since it's Easter, y'all, can I bring out the way the old preacher said it? They said they led him from judgment hall to judgment hall, and he never said a mumbling word. The old preacher said, and they whipped him all night long. They lynched him on an old rugged cross. Y'all ain't praying with me. They hung him high. They stretched him wide. They hung him high and they stretched him wide. And he died. I said they killed him and he died. He died until the sun refused to shine. He died until the earth began to reel and rock like a drunken man. He died until the moon dripped in blood, and they took a spear and they speared him in the side until blood and water came streaming down. And I've got good news for you. They took him off that cross. They buried him in a borrowed tomb. And somebody said, why was it a borrowed tomb? It's because he only needed weekend reservations, because he stayed there on Friday, stayed there all day on Saturday, but early, on Sunday morning, God reached down all the way past the ground, reached down past the core, reached down all the way down to hell, picked him up and raised him up higher than the stratosphere, higher than the ionosphere, higher than the first heaven, higher than the second heaven. He raised him up with all power, not some power, not most power, not a lot of power, but he raised him with all power in heaven and earth in his hands. Is there anybody here that can say, I'm glad that the tomb is empty because the throne is full? And since it's resurrection day, I came by to celebrate. I came to say my life might look bad now, but I can get up because he got up. And because he lives, I can face tomorrow because he lives. All fear is gone because I know who holds the future, and the life is worth the living just because he lives. And if that's your testimony, I dare you right now to say yeah or say yes. I can't hear you. Go ahead and hit some likes, hit some hearts, honk your horn if you are excited because of the resurrection, because he got up, and because he got up, you can get up and you can walk in everything that God has called you to walk into. Don't let the emptiness make you afraid, but let the emptiness direct you to the fullness of the one on the throne. I dare you right now to go ahead and give God glory right where you are. I got a question for you. Do you know him? I said, do you know him? I was supposed to preach a homily, but I done messed around and got happy on this side of Zion. My soul done got happy because he lives, because he lives. Corona might be real, but there are some things I may not know, and there are some places I cannot go. But of this one thing, I am sure that God is real, because I can feel him in my soul. How do I know it? I serve a risen Savior. He's in the world today. I know that he is with me. Whatever people say, I see his hand of mercy. I hear his voice of cheer. And just the time I need him, he's always near. He lives. He lives. He lives. He lives. Christ Jesus lives today. He walks with me. He talks with me along life's narrow way. He lives. He lives. He lives. Salvation to impart. You ask me. You ask me. You ask me how I know. You ask me how I know. He lives. He lives. within my heart.